Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. Back with another Big 12 team preview here. We've got the Baylor Bears. Before we do dive in, if you have been liking our content so far, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We do appreciate all the support. But diving in, this Baylor team is pretty different now. I mean, none of the players that feel like that have been there for the last, now 4 or 5 years, that continuity of guys. Langston Love left for Georgetown, of course, and then all those other guys are graduated. So much different roster now. But Scott Drew, went out in the portal. Of course, lost Rob Wright, which was kind of the headline of the offseason. Fully expected to have him back, and then BYU threw $4 million at him, and it's hard to turn down $4 million at 19 years old. So, but now here they are, much different looking team. But we'll start on the offensive side of the ball here. Cody, what strengths do you see in this Baylor offense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would have turned down the $4 million either if I was, playing college hoops at that age. But yeah, I mean, this would have been his offense, but he's still going to be pretty impactful over there. But yeah, for strengths for Baylor, I just think like they still did a nice job accumulating talent across the board, really, particularly with the perimeter group. The like Obi Agbim, JJ White, and Tunde Yesufu are going to be. I think it should be a really good trio that can play off of each other at a fairly high level due to their capabilities as spot-up scorers. It looks a little bit differently from each one of those guys. Like JJ White can knock it down off the catch. He can attack closeouts a little bit, and same with Obi Agbim. He'll be more catch and shoot when he's playing off the ball. He won't be providing a ton of value at the rim, but Yesufu is, he'll be a different guy out of spot up where he's going to be able to catch the ball, attack a closeout, and really dunk on anyone's head, really, in the entire country. He's going to be one of the best drivers that we've seen. There are some VJ Edgecombe like comparisons if you want like a past Baylor Bear, but I think Yesufu is an even better rim scorer and even more physical rim scorer. I don't think his perimeter game is as far along as Edgecombe, but I think you could kind of compare the two in some aspects. So it's going to be a good group. It's going to be a fun group. Then you look at the front court. They brought in Michael Ratai, who he's an intriguing offensive talent who he can score the ball in like multiple ways, whether that's through like the lower mid post, some in isolation from the top of the key, and then you can work through him on the elbow a little bit. Like I kind of struggled to see the vision of where he fits. Like without the ball in his hands, I don't really love how much value he brings to the table, but he is a really fun player to watch, and he's a very talented on-ball scorer. So when some guys go to the bench, he's going to be able to take on some responsibility. If guys get injured, they're still going to have some primary creators. So it's like the depth of the talent is pretty impressive, and it kind of gets rounded out by the front court and Justin Bodo and Caden Powell. I think they're going to be able to dominate the offensive glass. It's kind of been a staple of Scott Drew teams, like more so like the past like 5 or 6, 7 years ago, like when they really leaned into their offensive rebounding ability. They struggled to shoot it a little bit, but they were able to just clean up every second chance opportunity and finish at the rim. And I think they're going to be able to do that again. Bodo at 18% offensive rebound rate that led the nation out of qualifiers, and Caden Powell was 13.8% on the offensive glass, which was actually 48th nationally. So you have two of the top 50 offensive rebounders in the country. And like, I don't know if they're going to be able to play together all that much, but they're going to have a guy on the floor who's going to be able to hammer the glass consistently. Ratai's okay in that front. I think Yesufu is actually going to provide some value at 6'5" on the offensive glass. And there's not a ton down the board depth wise, but just having one of those two on the floor at all times is going to make them a very good offensive rebounding unit.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing I had noted was like their offensive rebounding attack should be really good. I think even like a guy like Yesufu at 6'5", a little bit smaller, but a physical guy, I think that can help out on the offensive glass too. Michael Ratai as well. I kind of like this Baylor offense a little bit. Like I think there's some pieces that fit solidly. You did mention like Ratai, what he's going to look like playing off the ball some, which he's a career 33% 3-point shooter. So there's a little bit of question mark, 34% last year, but I do think they may play through him a decent bit. Just maybe even like early in the season. I think the guards, all transferring up, which I don't typically put a lot of stock in, but like JJ White, who figures to be on the ball, him and Obi Agbim. I have some concerns. I think just like projecting, forecasting, like struggling with taking care of the basketball a little bit. I think like JJ White, you just look at small sample size stuff. Like obviously last year they only played in 2 top 50 games at Omaha. And he had a 35.4% turnover rate in those games. And then 24% in 8 top 100 games last year. So a little bit bigger of a sample size. Overall for his career, 18.4%. But, pretty much his entire career, he's been over 25% against top 50 teams. And that's a sample size of 10 games. So, I do have some concerns with their guard group and taking care of the basketball. Particularly early on in this season, I think they might have to lean on Ratai a little bit more, as kind of like a creator for them, particularly in the half court. Because I think like we've seen this story before with guys coming from the Summit League, where it doesn't always look pretty when they transfer up. So I do have some concerns with the guard group taking care of the basketball. They're talented as catch and shoot options, and they're good offensive talents. But I do think that's a concern, particularly when they play teams like Iowa State and Houston and Kansas and Texas Tech, right? These defenses that are, really built to bother opposing guard play.
Yeah, those are definitely valid points. And what I will say is one of those games that JJ White played was against St. John's. Like, I don't know if it's like a fair game for him. Like, he's jumps from the Summit League to playing probably the best defense in the entire country outside of Houston. And obviously, you got to be a little bit better taking care of the ball. There's a larger sample size of him not being able to do that. But I do think there's more traits in his game than your typical Summit League player. Like, there's a little more pop off the bounce than your average Summit League guy who's more movement shooter, like really relying on their perimeter game. I think JJ White has like some 3-level scoring qualities. He'd be okay there. My actual concern comes with like the shooting outside of JJ White and Obi Agbim. Like, because like how like are we going to be able to see these guys play together for like large spurts of a game, like more than 20 to 25 minutes? Because they're not the greatest defenders out there. And I know Scott Drew will play smaller guards. He's fine with doing that for large portions, but I don't like if one of those guys is off the floor. I think the shooting is like kind of a problem. Like Yesufu is probably a negative. I think he can get to 33-34% on like low-ish volume, like maybe get to 100 attempts this year. Dan Skillings doesn't shoot the ball well. He has a large sample size of not doing so. Ratai is fine, but on really low volume, he's not a real shooting talent. And there's no front court floor spacing. And there's really like the depth is kind of a concern as well. And there's not really guys that can shoot it. Like you have a guy like Isaac Williams, who they brought in, who just can't shoot. He's 6'2", can't shoot. He's a, like on ball guard, and he's not really able to provide anything from the perimeter. Cameron Carr is not a shooter. It's just outside of those two, they're going to have to carry a large load for a Baylor offense, like a modern Baylor offense that typically likes to shoot the rock at a high level. I don't really think they're going to do it all that well. I think they're going to be really good in some other areas, but I don't think shooting is going to be like a plus quality in the Big 12.
No, it's a great point, right? You mentioned like Dan Skillings, very large sample size at this point of 3 years of him not being a shooter. Ratai is okay. Yesufu projects to be okay. But beyond that, like the overall depth at the guard spots isn't like going to blow you away. And already where the guys that are playing can't really shoot it at a high clip, it is certainly a concern. But shifting gears now to the defensive side of the ball, I think again there are plenty of issues on this defense. Much like last year where it was not a great unit, and Scott Drew was trying to mix it up and do a lot of different things, playing some zone to hopefully throw some offenses off. But strengths out of this defense, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, last year was just it was tough to watch at times, and I can't get that first game against Gonzaga out of my head when I just had no idea what Baylor was trying to accomplish on the defensive end. It was a pretty horrific matchup for them with the Graham Ike, Braden Huff, Ben Gregg trio. Like they just had no size to handle it, and they didn't have depth throughout the year. They dealt with injuries. John, when I went down early in conference play, Omier had to play the five way too often. He just not a power conference center from a defensive standpoint. He does a lot of things well, protecting the rim and just handling size isn't one of those things. But this year, I actually do think they have a much better roster across the board, and it's built to protect the rim better. I mean, Bodo and Powell, I think, create a solid rim protection floor for 40 minutes. It's not overwhelming, and I guess there are like slight concerns with how their games translate and how they fit in this system, but I think just having that actual presence is going to be important for a Scott Drew defense this year. And it's a bigger roster in general. Like last year's group, like I mentioned, had a bunch of small guards who weren't necessarily fantastic defenders. I mean, Jaden Nunn and VJ Edgecombe are exempt from that statement. They were pretty good defenders. Outside of that, they were pretty rough. And I think having bigger and more athletically gifted guards and wings is going to really benefit Baylor this year. Yesufu is a freak athlete who can defend multiple positions. Dan Skillings has been known as a great defender throughout his entire career. So just having those guys on the floor for a long period of time is going to be really good for them. Ratai is not the greatest defender. He at least has some length and he can rebound the ball. So I think it's a group that improves in the effective field goal percentage category. They finished 240th nationally in this area last year. I think we see a large jump. I think we can see them get into at least inside the top 150, maybe even inside the top 100.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like Yesufu is a really intriguing prospect. I think like with his physicality, and then like you said, Skillings, has been a good defender for now a few years, so that should certainly help. And then you mentioned the size of Bodo and Powell should help in the rim protection department. For me, like my main concern here on this defense, like you mentioned, Ratai is not a good defender, but for me, it comes in guarding, opposing point guards and guards. Like Obi Agbim, coming over from Wyoming, doesn't really project as a great defender. His 1 year at Wyoming last year, 1.8% steal rate. More just an offensive minded guard, right? He doesn't really want to dig in on that end all that often. And then JJ White, who, was in the Summit League, like we've talked about, a league that doesn't really play defense. And he isn't really all that great of a defender anyway. So now making the leap to the Big 12, I have major concerns with their ability to control the basketball, keep it in front, and generate like turnovers out of their guard defense, which a lot of other teams in this league are going to be able to do. I'm not sure that is going to be a strength of this team.
Yeah, I would agree. That last point was really my main point with this defense is Scott Drew defenses can typically turn you over at a high clip with all those small guards that they play. That's one thing that they're going to typically do really well. This roster doesn't really fit that mold. I mean, they finished 89th nationally in turnover rate defense last year, which I think there was a little bit more in the tank there, but they had to mask like their rim protection issues, had to play a little more conservative at times. This isn't really a roster that's built to get after you. I don't love Agbim and White as defenders, like you said. I do think there's like some playmaking in the tank from Yesufu and Skillings, but I just don't really think this is a defense that's built to play the scheme that they normally play with, like the rim denial scheme. Like they brought in like more rim protection to, and I don't really like these guys as like recovery defenders all that much. They're more primary rim protectors, which I kind of hinted at it in the transfer portal review. I almost think there's somewhat of a scheme change coming for Scott Drew's team. It's maybe going to be a little bit more reliant on like forcing teams into the mid range, like not really rotating as often defensively. Like I think they have better on ball defenders than off ball. So I have some pretty soft takes about this defense. I wouldn't be surprised if a change is coming with the scheme because they lost Jerome Tang 3 years ago and they haven't had a good defense since. I think maybe Scott Drew is starting to see the light here with his defenses are they're kind of falling apart. He doesn't have his guy anymore that's managed fantastic defenses, and maybe he's going to just completely switch up his scheme. I'm not 100% sure. It's more speculation, but I think he has the roster to potentially get a little bit more passive and value like effective field goal percentage, like I mentioned, and maybe not get after you as much on the defensive side.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? I mean, you'd think something probably has to change after what 3 or 4 years now of like a pretty poor defense after as good as they were, in that team that won the national championship. That defense was so ridiculous.
Yeah, the finishes, it was the last 3 years, 102nd, 88th, and 67th. And that was after 3 years, like 2020, they were third. 2021, they were 25th when they won the national championship. In 2022, they finished 14th defensively. When he left, it was just a major drop off. And it wasn't like the personnel got like a ton worse. It did get worse. They had some really good defenders through those 3 years there that I mentioned, but it didn't get that much worse.
No. Now, shifting gears here to our team MVP and X Factor, where'd you go with these?
I went with Tunde Yesufu as my MVP, and I also went with him as my X Factor. I think he's going to have to do a lot of things on both sides of the ball, but mostly as a defender. I think he's going to have to pick up a lot of the slack for the lacking guards. I think he's going to have to potentially guard opposing point guards. Like if that's the best player on the opposing offense, he's going to have to take on the challenge and guard them. He's going to have to guard some threes, like some bigger threes, like potentially like a 6'8", 6'9" forward. That's the most threatening player on the other offense. So I think mostly for the defense is going to be extremely important, but I'm also very high on his offensive game, or at least his offensive upside. He's going to be a great scorer at the rim. He's just a freak athlete that he can fight through contact as well. And I think as a long-term shooting prospect, he's going to eventually get to like 36, 37% at some point. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but I think he's going to be ready. He's going to be more ready than people think.
Yeah. I went the same way for my MVP. I think he has more upside than anyone else on their team. To score at all three levels, to be, a physical driver, physical finisher, physical on the defensive end, and create plays that way. I think it's just he looks different than the rest of this team. And then X Factor, I went with Michael Rataj. Reason being, I think, he kind of is like that Swiss Army knife that I think, like, if he can be, he's 6'9", right? He's long. They're going to go play through him at times. And if he can provide a little bit more off ball shooting, I think that's going to be really important to this team. Because right, as you talked about earlier, JJ White, Agbim, both are like, those are their two shooters, right? They're both off the catch shooters. Can Rataj provide a little bit more shooting off the ball? Can he be a little bit more serviceable on the defensive end? To be or to make Baylor, more of a force. So ultimately, I went with him. Obviously, coming off a great season at Oregon State. So we'll see what happens as this season develops for him. Now, looking at ceiling floor for Baylor, where do you see them falling this year?
Yeah, I mean, for a ceiling, I think finishing top 4 in the Big 12 is a possibility. Depending on, I think Yesufu is a big piece in that. Like if he reaches his ceiling, this can be a really good offense, and he's going to provide a lot of value defensively as well. So I think they can be top 4 in the Big 12, like a 3 or 4 seed in the tournament. See, their floor is more like middle of the pack in this league, maybe like 8th or 9th. Like if the defense like really falls apart, just because we don't love the roster and It's not really built for a typical Scott Drew defense, and I think they could be. I still think they're a tournament team at their floor, but I think it's closer to like a 10 seed.
Yeah. I kind of saw it similarly. I said they could get up maybe as high as third, just because I think there are in this Big 12, there are a lot of teams right now in that sort of like after Houston, like 2 through 8, 2 through 7 that do have like some sort of glaring weakness or concern, right? So I think it's going to be which teams can overcome them, which teams have guys that kind of play outside of what we've typically known them to be. So I think like there is a world where they could get up to third. I think they probably are more likely to finish in that 5-6 range. I had their floor down at 8-9 as well. Just I think the defense isn't fantastic. Like we talked about, the shooting isn't great. So I think that there is a world where they could fall to that, but I kind of expect them to be somewhere in the middle of that. But we'll see. Scott Drew, I'm a big fan of. Obviously, he's going to kind of right the ship here after a couple of down years.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a lot of people that are more down on Scott Drew now. So maybe this is the year that they can actually surprise some people. They're always expected to be up within the top 10 in the nation. And now they're more expected to sit around that fringe top 25 range. Maybe he can surprise some people.
Right. Now, did you have a bold prediction here?
Yeah, it was Yesufu related. I said he sits at like 14th in the recruiting rankings right now on 3. I think he's like 17th and 24/7s, but I think there's a realistic outcome that he can become a top 5 freshman in this class, and he can make himself a potential top 5 pick in this draft, and can also make an all Big 12 team. There's like, if he reaches his ceiling, he can be a first teamer. I think second team is more likely, but I'm pretty high on his talent. I think as the year goes on, he's going to keep getting better.
Yeah, that's certainly fair. I like I don't know. He has some intrigue to his game because it's kind of just a fun. Like you compared him off the air to like a lesser Anthony Edwards. Like he kind of just plays like that physical way where he's always kind of relentlessly attacking downhill. I think my bold prediction for this Baylor team, I think they do finish. I think they finish 4th in this league, and they do get a top 5 seed in the tournament. Like I'm a believer in Scott Drew. Like I said, I think that there are, like I said, a lot of question marks with some of these teams in the Big 12. So I think there really is a path for them to kind of get back on track. Obviously, last year they were in the 8-9 game. I think this year, different roster. Scott Drew, like you kind of alluded to, maybe a scheme change coming. I think they finished 4th in this league. And I think like what's Torvik project them right now? They're like 6th or 7th probably.
Yeah, I think 7th.
Yeah. So I think they finished 4th, get a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, but we'll see.
That's fair. I mean, it's obviously in the realm of possibility. He's done it before, and he obviously has like talented. He also obviously has a talented roster, especially from an offensive standpoint. It's just a matter of making the right changes defensively.
Yeah, I wasn't going to be as bold as last year because last year my bold prediction for Baylor was they're going to make the Final Four, and that didn't go well.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. But we'll wrap things up here with Baylor, and we'll see you next time on the Mainly Hoops podcast.